thank you again, Lynn. And again, her novel, In the Time of Peacocks, is available at the table over there. Our next reader will be DC Broad, DC Deb Broad. Deb is the award-winning author of 8 novels and a number of short stories. Her novels include a private detective series featuring Quint McCauley, Heartstone, a contemporary Arthurian suspense novel, and Getting Sassy, Getting Lucky, and Getting Taken, which are capers in the Getting Even series. She has a fondness for corvids, famous grouse, and Middle Earth, not necessarily in that order. You can check out her website at dcbroad.com. She's also blogging for her alpha cat at jurassiccat.wordpress.com. She lives in St. Charles with her husband, Don, and the other cat. Tonight she reads an excerpt from My Heroes Have Always Been Shortstops, a story in her newly released Chicago Cubs triple play, available now on Kindle. Is it also available here tonight, or is it?
It's just on Kindle.
That one's just on Kindle, but she does have Getting Sassy and Getting Lucky and Heartstone here tonight. I recommend all of them. Deb Broad, DC Broad.
Thank you. This story I wrote for an anthology called Chicago Blues, and the rules were that it had to be set in Chicago, and it had to have something to do with blue, be it the cops, the lake, whatever, so I chose the Cubs. They sort of feed my muse for whatever reason. So it's called My Heroes Have Always Been Shortstops. Tonight, the Cubs are playing in the 7th game of the World Series. It is fiction, by the way. Tonight, the Cubs are playing in the 7th game of the World Series, in Wrigley Field, no less, against the Twins. And instead of sitting in one of the choice seats behind home plate where I belong, I am watching the game in my condo, my television casting an eerie blue-white glow in the dark. I'm alone except for Ernie, my gray tabby. Last week, I took him to a woman who paints cats, literally. So now he's got a Cubs logo painted on his right side, and I think it becomes him. I've made myself some popcorn and have opened a $50 bottle of Pinot Noir. I'd been saving it for after the game, hoping to share it with someone, but now that's not going to happen. It's the bottom of the 7th, and we're behind 6-5. That's not insurmountable, but we're the ones with the catching up to do. I just hope I don't have to leave before I know how this comes out. I've muted the sound and have my radio tuned low to WGN so I can hear our local guys announce the game. During their chatter, they occasionally wonder what happened to Keith, but for the most part, they keep their comments on the play-by-play. And that's good, because this game is the only thing in the world that matters right now. Every atom in my body is tuned to it. But sometimes during the commercials, my mind wanders, and when it does, it can't help sliding back to that day last winter when Keith McCall first walked into our offices, and once there, it can't help but run the bases, so to speak. I work for a sports agent, so I meet a lot of ball players. My boss, Dave Meyer, is a Chicago boy, and so he set up his business here rather than New York or LA, and for that I am grateful. I will never leave Chicago, at least not of my own accord. I've worked for Dave for 5 years, came to him right out of college. He and my dad were friends, so I had some pull, but I do my job. I manage the office and am learning the fine art of negotiation. Keeping it professional has never been a problem for me. I've got big plans, and they don't include settling down with some athlete to raise his progeny. My goal is to be a sports agent by the time I hit 30. I will learn all I can from Dave, establish some contacts, and then go out on my own. I believe there is a place for women in this field. I didn't need anything interfering with my goal. I didn't need complications. Also, I guess I've always looked on baseball players as highly prized racehorses, beautiful to behold, but too high maintenance to be ridden every day. But then Dave took on Keith McCall, a promising shortstop, and I found how easy it is to alter my perceptions when appropriately motivated. I'm sure that part of it was the simple fact that he was a shortstop. I do love shortstops. It's not just the look of them, although I've always found tall, lanky types appealing. It's not simply the fact that for all the infield traffic they manage and the range required to do it, they're arguably the best athletes on the team. No, what really impresses me about a good shortstop is how he bounces back from an error, sometimes a real boneheaded play, and 30 seconds later he's out there fielding a pop-up. I'm not sure how they compartmentalize, where in their heads they put all those errors, but the really good ones excel at it. My first shortstop was my father. I worshipped him. He died when I was 12, and so I suppose that just added to this iconic image I had of him. Occasionally, my mother will suggest that knowing him as an adult would have given me some much-needed objectivity, but I never pursue that notion. Heroes are hard enough to come by. Anyway, there was Keith that day, dressed in a tweed sports jacket over jeans. I am convinced that men like Keith are the reason that jeans exist. He turned on a lopsided smile as he reached across my desk to shake my hand. And there was that grip, cool, firm, and all-encompassing. Well over 6 feet tall, he didn't slouch at all the way some tall, slender types do. I'd seen him play before, mainly as the Yankees' backup shortstop, and he was even more impressive up close. Dave saw something better than a backup in Keith and convinced him to sign with us. Dave placed one beefy hand on my shoulder and gave it a little squeeze and said, "Keith, you ever can't get hold of me? You talk to Abby here. Her word's as good as mine, and she's probably smarter." "He's right about that," I said to Keith with a grin. Actually, Dave wasn't exaggerating so much. Abby's the cleanup hitter, he likes to tell people, and baseball players can require a lot of mopping up, so I had plenty of practice. Add that to the fact that she's gorgeous and you've got a lethal combination. He gave me a final pat and led Keith back to his office, but not before Keith's gaze stayed on me until long past necessary. Less than a week later, David signed Keith to a very sweet deal with the Cubs. I'd seen him a number of times as I handled some of the details, and that smile just kept getting warmer. I couldn't have been happier that he was donning a Cub uniform. I guess I'd lost my objectivity, but I didn't realize that until too late. To celebrate, Dave took us to dinner with a couple of his friends. Keith fended off questions and good-natured joking with a deftness I didn't usually see off the diamond. When asked about his Missouri upbringing, Keith said he'd been a Cards fan his whole life, but the difference was only, quote, a matter of a few miles and a mindset. As per usual, I was the only woman at the gathering. Keith sat between Dave and me and managed to scooch my way during the course of the meal. Afterwards, we all adjourned to the bar. "What are you drinking?" he asked as he slid onto the bar stool next to mine. "Gin martini," I said, as if he hadn't already seen me down a couple of them. But I didn't mention the brand just to see how closely he was paying attention. He called it right, Bombay, and after I took my first sip, I said, "You're an observant man, aren't you?" "Sure am." He swallowed a gulp of beer and glanced over his shoulder at Dave and his friends, who were placing bets on which Bulls player would get the next three-pointer. He glanced up toward the screen, lingered there for a few seconds, and then I had his attention again. "I noticed you don't wear a wedding band," he said. "If you're wondering if I'm married, I'm not." Then I shrugged. "You could have asked." He shook his head. "Not as much fun." "So what else can you tell about me?" Looking down at me with narrowed eyes, he rubbed his chin. Tonight he wore a navy sweater over an untucked white shirt. He'd propped his feet on the stool's upper rung, and with his long legs all folded up, he reminded me of a giant praying mantis. I crossed one leg over the other, and I swung around to face him. He said, "You're a huge, and I mean a huge, Cubs fan." I snorted a chuckle. What gave it away? The photos behind my desk? My coffee mug? Business card holder? "Well, there's that, but that's run-of-the-mill Cubs paraphernalia." He paused, and his voice got a little husky. "It's not even that little pendant you wear most days." I had to stop myself from reaching for my throat. "So what is it?" He glanced down toward the floor, then back up to meet my eyes. "It's that toe ring." This stunned me on a couple of levels. First, I was both flattered and a little disturbed to realize that he had noticed my toes. They are at the end of my feet, which are at the end of my legs, and therefore quite a distance from his eyes. And that is what really stunned me. The ring is gold, the logo is gold. It is a subtle ring. This man had amazing vision. "I'll bet you can hit a curveball," I said. He gave me that slow smile as he nodded. I've been known to hit a few. Later that night, after commenting on my Cubs' bed linens, Keith leaned back into the blue pillow with a satisfied sigh. I decided it was my turn to pose the "are you married" question. "No," he said, folding his hands behind his head so one of his splayed elbows was inches from my nose. "Anyone special?" I was a little angry with myself for asking that. He turned his head toward me. "Not here," and then he added, "not until now." I crooked my arm and propped up my head with my fist so I could see over his elbow. I think it's fine that you've got someone back home or somewhere else. This tonight is nice, but I'm your agent's assistant. I don't want emotional attachments. With a sigh, he turned his face up toward the ceiling. I knew I was going to like Chicago. Somehow that wasn't quite the response I was hoping for. Once the season started, we settled into a comfortable pattern. I helped him find an apartment, although most of the time we spent together was at my condo, which overlooked Lake Michigan on one side and Wrigley Field on the other. We'd have dinner, sex, and then watch whatever game was on television. Some mornings we'd wake to the glare of the sun on the lake. Keith made breakfast, which usually included his secret ingredient salsa on an omelet or scrambled eggs. It was the closest thing to an actual relationship I had experienced, and I guess I liked what was forming between us. Dave warned me that Keith was a client, but I assured my boss that I wasn't in it for anything long term. And even if I had been, it would have not have been with a guy like Keith. At least that's what I told myself. We had nothing in common other than a mutual attraction in baseball. He liked country music, hunting, and voted Republican in every election since he turned 18. I was a vegetarian with eclectic music taste. No one in my family had ever admitted to voting Republican. But Keith and I had great sex, and we both loved sports, all kinds. I thought I was addicted, but Keith's enthusiasm could put me to shame. Not only did he put everything into his ball game, he also put everything into all games: basketball, golf, soccer, you name it. If an event could be scored, Keith was yelling or cheering at the TV. It wasn't long before I noticed that he wasn't consistent on what team he cheered or harangued. He could be yelling at a Bulls forward for missing a layup one night, and the next he'd be giving the Bulls' opponent a standing ovation. Finally, I had to ask, "You're a gambler, aren't you?" I'd been watching the game from the bed, wearing a short robe with the Sun-Times laid out in front of me. Keith had just cast aspersions on some Piston player's parentage, and it was a moment before my question sank in. When it did, he turned toward me, and I knew I was right. Before he answered, I said, "That's really, really stupid, you know." He ran a hand through his hair. "Not like it's against the rules." With an angry shake of his head, he added, "I'm not betting on baseball. You better not be." He got up from his chair and came over to the bed. "What you got against a little gambling?" I flipped a page in the newspaper and pretended to be scanning an article. "It's just a stupid thing to be doing with your money." "Not if you win." I looked up at him. "Do you?" "Sometimes." I turned another page so hard it tore. "Whoa," he said, taking my hand. "What's the big deal?" "You're a high-profile athlete. You're good-looking, articulate. You know there's already product endorsements possibilities out there. After you win the series, they'll be offering you top dollar. And if any of these sponsors get wind of a gambling habit, you can kiss those dollars goodbye." He kissed my neck. "But they're not going to find out. I'm discreet." I twisted so my neck was out of his reach. "Yeah, well, you'd better hope you are." If you want to find out what happened to Abby and Keith, you'll have to download it. Got 2 other stories in it.
Well, good cliffhanger. Any questions for Deb? And
Does funny just happen for you as you're writing? Like first draft, does it all come out, or is it kind of when you go back, do you find, because your writing always just, it's just full of little bits of humor.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the voice. Once I get into the voice of the character, it usually happens then, once I find the voice. Yeah. And not all, like Hearthstone is not very funny. And I was in a totally different voice, different mood, yeah. But I guess, yeah, it just kind of,
Bubbles up.
yeah, bubbles up.
John?
As a Cubs fan, how far into the future is this set?
Yeah, don't we wish? Well, it was funny. I put this anthology together, after they beat the Cardinals. I thought, what could go wrong? I just hope I didn't jinx them.
Marvelous piece, I love, and the title is just
Yeah,
extraordinary.
apologies to Willie Nelson. Thank you.
It has your usual skilled writing, but it sounds so fun. Did you enjoy writing this?
I really did. I really liked Abby a lot.
Related to her, huh?
Yeah, she's my shadow self. Yeah,
Cool.
thanks.
And Deb, how much are the books?
Well, the download is $4.99. The books, they vary, 15, like 20 for the Hearthstone, yeah, the hardcover, yeah. 15.
Anything else? Okay. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.